We gotta talk about Law 1 because I think almost everyone who's ever read it got the wrong takeaway, and it's turned one of the more useful ideas in that whole book into something people use as an excuse to just shrink themselves down forever. Never outshine the master. Say that phrase to 10 different people who've read the book, and at least 7 of them will tell you it means something like stay quiet, don't show off, let your boss take the credit, keep your head down so you don't threaten anyone above you. And if that's genuinely what the law meant, I'd be the first person telling you to throw it in the trash, because that's a miserable way to live your entire career. Dimming your own light forever so someone else feels comfortable isn't strategy. That's just self erasure with a fancy name attached to it. But here's the thing, that's not actually what the law is describing, at least not fully. It's a misread that comes from only absorbing the title and skipping the actual mechanics underneath it. So let's slow down and actually take this apart properly, because I think this is one of those cases where the popular version of an idea has completely drifted from the useful version of it. The law isn't really about hiding your talent. It's about timing and context around a very specific kind of person. Someone above you whose own sense of self-worth is fragile. Someone who needs to feel like the smartest person in the room in order to feel secure at all. That's a specific type of person. Not every boss, not every mentor, not every person with more power than you. Some people in positions above you are genuinely secure. They want you to shine. Your success reflects well on them, and they know it, and they're not threatened by it in the slightest. The law was never written for those people. It's written for the insecure ones, the ones who will quietly, sometimes unconsciously, start working against you the moment you make them feel small. So the actual skill being described isn't permanent dimming. It's reading which kind of person you're dealing with and adjusting your visibility accordingly, especially early in that relationship, before trust has been built. That's a completely different instruction than never be impressive. It's closer to be strategic about when and how your impressiveness gets seen until you understand who you're actually working with. Let's build out an example, because this makes way more sense with a real shape around it. Say you start a new job. You're sharp, you catch on to things fast, and within your first 2 weeks, you notice a flaw in a process your manager built years ago. You could raise your hand in the very next team meeting and lay it all out in front of everyone. Here's what's wrong, here's how I'd fix it. Aren't I clever for spotting this on day 9? Technically correct. Strategically, that's often a disaster, and not because your manager is a bad person. It's because you've just publicly demonstrated, in front of their own team, that the new hire caught something they missed. Even a reasonably secure manager might flinch at that, and an insecure one will quietly start looking for reasons your ideas don't quite fit going forward. Now take the same insight, same person, same flaw noticed, but you bring it to your manager privately first. Hey, I noticed this pattern, curious what you think, might just be missing context on why it's built this way. Same intelligence on display, completely different social outcome. You haven't hidden your talent at all. You've just chosen the room it gets seen in. That's the actual law, not silence. Sequencing. Now let's flip that same scenario around, because this is where the nuance actually gets interesting instead of just theoretical. Same new job, same sharp new hire, same flaw spotted in week 2. Except this time, the manager is one of those rare, genuinely secure people. Confident in their own position, doesn't need constant validation, actually built their whole leadership style around wanting their team to outgrow them. If you handle that manager with the same cautious, private, wait-and-see approach, you haven't done anything wrong exactly, but you've probably left value on the table. That manager might have loved seeing you speak up immediately, might have used it as a moment to publicly champion you in front of the wider team. Excessive caution with a secure person doesn't backfire the way overexposure does with an insecure one, but it does slightly waste an opportunity. Which tells you something important. This law was never a universal rule to apply identically to every person above you. It's a diagnostic. Step 1 is always reading the person, not reflexively applying the posture. And this is really the crux of where the popular misreading goes wrong. People treat it like a fixed behavior. Dim yourself, always, everywhere, forever, as a kind of permanent professional posture. But applied that way, to a secure boss who wants you to grow, it doesn't protect you from anything. It just quietly caps you. You end up dimming your light in front of people who never asked you to, purely out of habit, purely because you absorbed the title of the law without absorbing what it was actually built to diagnose. Let's talk about where this shows up outside of the office too, because it's not just a corporate thing. Think about mentorship relationships generally. A coach and an athlete, a senior artist and their apprentice, even parent and child in certain seasons of life. Every one of these relationships has some version of this same dynamic buried in it. There's almost always a moment where the student's ability starts to catch up to, or even pass, the mentors. How that moment gets handled says a lot about both people involved. A secure mentor treats that moment as the entire point of mentoring in the first place. The whole goal was always for the student to eventually outgrow them. An insecure mentor treats that exact same moment as a threat, sometimes without even realizing that's what's happening internally, and starts subtly undercutting the student instead of celebrating them. The student, in either case, benefits from the same basic awareness this law is actually describing. Pay attention to which kind of mentor you have, and calibrate how loudly you demonstrate your growth accordingly, at least until the relationship has enough trust built into it to absorb a more direct display of how far you've come. Let's slow down even further on that mentorship thread, because I think it's actually the clearest possible lens for understanding this whole law, clearer even than the corporate example. Think about any craft passed down from one generation of practitioners to the next. A kitchen, a workshop, a dojo, a family business. There's an entire, almost invisible choreography that happens as the junior person's skill rises. In the healthiest version of that relationship, the senior person actively narrates the student's growth to other people. Watch this one. They're going to be better than me within a year. That's not insecurity talking. That's someone secure enough in their own worth that their legacy becomes the success of the people they trained, not the permanent gap between themselves and everyone under them. But you've probably also seen the other version, maybe even lived it. The senior figure who gets subtly colder as the junior person improves. Withholds a piece of information here, delays a promotion there, starts finding small, technically defensible reasons why the junior person isn't ready yet for the next step, long after they clearly were. That's the exact dynamic Law 1 is actually pointing at, not a rule that says students should hide their growth forever. A warning that some senior figures cannot emotionally tolerate being outgrown, and the people under them need to read that early and adjust their pacing accordingly, rather than getting blindsided by resentment they never saw coming because they assumed all mentors operate like the secure ones. Now here's where I want to push on this from another angle, because I want to give this law a genuinely fair fight, not just defend it uncritically once I've found the more charitable reading of it. Even with the more accurate interpretation, even understanding it's about timing and reading insecurity rather than permanent hiding. There's still a real cost hiding inside this strategy that's worth naming, honestly, and I don't think enough people talk about this part. If you spend years being strategic about when your talent gets seen, calibrating, softening, choosing rooms carefully, there's a real risk you get so good at managing other people's egos that you forget how to just be visibly, unapologetically good at something without immediately scanning the room for who might feel threatened by it. That's not nothing. That's a genuine cost. Some of the most talented people I've ever come across seem to carry this constant low hum of self-monitoring, this instinct to make themselves slightly smaller than they actually are, just in case. And over enough years, that instinct stops being a tool you pick up situationally and starts being the water you swim in all the time, even in rooms where nobody's threatened by you at all. Here's what that actually looks like from the inside, if you've ever experienced it. You finish a piece of work you're genuinely proud of, instead of just presenting it plainly. Here's what I made. Here's why I think it's good. You find yourself pre-apologizing for it. This is probably nothing. I just messed around with it, even when you know full well it's strong work. That habit doesn't come from humility. It comes from years of practicing strategic smallness until it stopped being strategic and just became your default volume setting. The tragedy is you can end up doing this reflexively, even around people who would have genuinely celebrated you if you just let them see the real size of what you did. And here's the part that I think matters most in all of this: that cost compounds quietly, the same way any habit does. Each individual instance of softening yourself, of choosing the smaller room, of underselling the win, feels harmless on its own. It's just one meeting, one conversation, one moment. But strung together across years, across a whole career, that pattern becomes identity. You don't just perform smallness anymore. You start to believe it's simply who you are, size included, rather than a strategy you once picked up for very specific rooms with very specific people in them. There's actually a second, quieter cost worth naming too, one that isn't about you at all. It's about the people around you who genuinely deserve to see your full ability and didn't get to. Every time you soften a win in front of someone who would have been inspired by the full, undimmed version of it, you've taken something away from them too, not just yourself. Somebody on your team might have needed to see exactly how good the work could be in order to raise their own bar. A friend might have needed to see you fully celebrate something in order to feel permission to do the same in their own life. Constant strategic dimming doesn't just cost you visibility. It quietly caps the ceiling for everyone standing close enough to be affected by your example. So here's where I actually land on this, and I want to be honest that it's not a clean, simple verdict either way. The law, read properly, isn't the trap most people think it is. It's not telling you to disappear. It's telling you to be aware of who you're dealing with, and to be strategic about sequencing your visibility with people whose insecurity could work against you, which, frankly, is just good social intelligence, not weakness. Reading a room and choosing your moment isn't the same thing as hiding forever. Most genuinely powerful, genuinely respected people you'll ever meet are doing exactly this kind of calibration constantly, and it doesn't make them small. It makes them effective. But the misread version, the version where you take this as permission to just never take up space, never advocate for your own work, never let your talent be seen clearly by anyone, ever, out of some vague fear of upsetting somebody. That version will absolutely wreck a career and a person's sense of self right along with it. The law was never asking for that. People just found it easier to hide behind the famous law than to admit they were simply scared of being seen. Let me give you something practical to actually walk away with, because I don't want to just leave this as an abstract idea. Next time you're about to soften something, a piece of work, an accomplishment, an idea in a meeting, pause for 1 second and actually ask yourself which situation you're in. Are you genuinely reading an insecure person correctly? Someone whose ego is realistically going to work against you if you're too visible right now? Or are you just running the old, worn-in habit of shrinking, applied automatically, to a room that never actually asked that of you? Those two situations look identical from the outside. Softening your voice, holding back a detail, letting someone else take a bit of the spotlight. But one of them is strategy. The other is just quiet self-abandonment wearing a strategy's clothes. And if you're on the other side of this, if you're the one with more power in a given relationship, the manager, the mentor, the senior voice in the room, this law actually hands you a quieter, more important instruction too, one that rarely gets talked about. Notice your own reaction the next time someone under you does something genuinely impressive. Notice if there's a flicker of something uncomfortable underneath the polite congratulations. That flicker is worth paying attention to, because it's the exact insecurity this entire law was written to protect other people from. You get to decide whether you become the kind of senior figure people have to strategically manage around, or the kind who makes that whole strategy unnecessary in the first place, because your own security was never resting on staying the most impressive person in the room. Learn to read the room, absolutely. Notice who's secure and who isn't, absolutely. But don't confuse that skill with a lifelong instruction to make yourself smaller. Because somewhere underneath all of Greene's laws, buried under all the strategy and maneuvering, The actual point was always to end up more powerful, more capable, more visible over time, not less. Never outshine the master was never supposed to mean never shine at all. It was only ever supposed to mean know exactly who's in the room with you before you decide how bright to be, and never let that early caution quietly turn into a permanent ceiling you built for yourself, one small dimming at a time, long after anyone actually asked you to. Not letting a room's insecurities decide how bright you're allowed to be, and not letting one guarded moment early on quietly turn into a habit of staying small forever. That's really the whole law, stripped down. Read the room, choose your timing, but never mistake caution for who you actually are. Never outshine the master was never shine at all. Thanks for watching, guys. I look forward to your comments.